Hello and welcome to the Confidently Navigating Midlife Health Conversation. I'm your host, Marianne Dover. Our special guest today is Jessica Preston. She is a physician's assistant. She has a company called Denovo Fertility, and she's actually going to be speaking to us about the fertility issues that are pretty complicated in midlife women. And she's going to start out with telling us her own infertility story, and we're just going to go from there and ask her some pertinent questions that I think can relate to a lot of women within this midlife age group. So, welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne.
Yeah. So I know that you had your own infertility story, and it was a struggle for you to be able to find the answers. So, can you tell our audience a little bit about that and about yourself?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. So I'm a physician assistant. I've been practicing for over 20 years now in the field of OBGYN. So I was already working in the field of infertility and fertility assistance, not in the IVF world. That is a separate world. I was in a generalist OBGYN, so your normal OBGYN practice. And I was 35 and newly married. And when we decided to conceive, I found out that I was actually not ovulating regularly. I was not ovulating at all. And I found that this was it put me into the same shoes, and I really felt like I was, to be honest, I felt I was supposed to be there so that I could learn this and relate to the people that I was working with. And we were fortunate I was 35, as I said. We were fortunate to conceive, but in our 30s is when we see that egg reserve starts declining and we start having other issues with our own health. And so we can see that decline occur and more infertility issues happen. So I did end up with assistance. I did not end up with IVF, but I ended up with some medical intervention, and I did conceive twins. Through my journey, my twins are now 16 and a half, and they are incredible. But I also had complications during my pregnancy. I was preterm labor at 24 weeks. I was bed rest for 8 weeks, and then I delivered two 3-pound babies at 32 weeks gestation. They were in the NICU for a few weeks. It was quite an experience, and at that point in time, I really started looking at how can I help more. It's a very hard experience emotionally to go through fertility when it seems to be an inalienable right to procreate, right?
Mhm.
It's one of those things where if we want it, we should have it. And when we want other things like a car or a house or something materialistic, it doesn't have the import of having a baby and really wanting to have a child. And so I really started focusing in that direction at that point in time. My background prior to medicine was biochemistry, and I've always focused more on the functional medicine aspect of biochemistry based medicine and looking at that subclinical space of why are things going wrong in any health condition. And I decided to focus in this area on fertility.
Well, it's a great subject because anymore women are waiting later and later in life to be able to conceive. And they don't always know exactly the direction that they should take. I see them when they're starting to have their problems and they just don't understand. They think that maybe lifestyle has a lot to do with it. And so they will start to clean up their diet and look for different interventions. They think that maybe they have PCOS and different things, and they've gone to multiple doctors. They haven't been given any kind of conclusive evidence that they are lacking any particular hormone or have a chemical imbalance in their body. And so they're very distraught. They go around with this want and need, like you mentioned, and they know that the time clock is ticking. Their time is running out. They either need to freeze their eggs, but they're thinking, why freeze eggs if I'm getting to the point where I'm too old to be even able to carry these children? So they go through a lot of imbalance in their mind about what they should do. Should they or shouldn't they? So, what's your take on age-related fertility changes? What do you think about that?
So I'm a combination of conventional medicine, so I'm going to talk a bit about that as well as the functional aspect of how these two areas can marry together. So I do work with IVF clinics and conventional medicine providers as well who talk about that age and decline. And so starting at around the age of 30, that's when we notice that there is more of a decline in fertility. So we end up in this space where we have a decreasing egg reserve, we have more medical issue such as we can have more issues such as fibroids or endometriosis or hypertension, where we can end up with more difficulty in conceiving or even carrying to term. So I am seeing that on the rise, as well as even it's a hitting younger and younger ages as well. And there's something called it's used to be called premature ovarian failure, which means that we are getting into menopause at earlier and earlier ages. And my observation in this is those factors that you're discussing, the lifestyle modification, nutrition, uh, exercise, movement, stress, all of these actually do have a physiologic response in our body that is subclinical to the lab testing levels that we are even seeing. So when it comes to the infertility aspect, we have uh, explained infertility, such as we know your hormones are imbalanced or you have PCOS or endometriosis, and these are structural or diagnostic criteria. And then we have this large 49% of infertility cases at this point in time that
That's
are 49%. So it's that are unexplained infertility. And so those we are falling into this basket that you and I are discussing, which is your hormones are imbalanced, but we don't quite know why, or you have subclinical hypothyroidism. And so you go to your doctor and you get your levels checked and they say you're normal, but you're not feeling normal. We have the symptoms before we have a diagnosis. And so when we're in that gray area, that gray zone, that's where we end up with this. We don't know what's going on with us and what's wrong. And the older we get, the more likely we're going to fall into that range.
wow. I did talk with another coach that said there were a lot of complications that were affecting males as well. But
40%
said, yeah,
of
and this is
infertility
a
cases.
huge, that is just huge. I didn't realize it was that big of a problem.
Yeah,
So,
it's tremendous. That 40%. So you can have a male factor infertility, a female factor infertility. And what I caution people from is if you find, you know, one factor from one partner, don't rule out the other partner because both partners can have an issue, and male factor infertility is impacting up to 40% of infertility cases right now.
wow, they're not then far apart from one another. If the
No.
female is 49% and the male is 40, they're almost neck and neck.
Well, that
Um,
49% is 49% of of infertility is just the unexplained.
I
11%
see.
is explained with a diagnosis, and the other 40% are structural, like you have blockages in your tubes or you have a varicocele in the male partner, and so they aren't making sperm. So that's the for all of fertility.
Okay, I see. So, what do you think can optimize their success?
So there are I think it's important when the general rule for convention, just so you know, when you're talking about your conventional office, if you're at the age of 35, if you've been trying to conceive for 6 months and you haven't conceived, see your doctor. If you're trying to conceive and you don't have regular periods, see your doctor sooner because you are clearly not ovulating regularly. If you're 40 and you want to conceive, then just go in right away and have the conversation so you can start getting evaluated and see where you are. I have people in my program mostly over 35. People that I have worked with are up to the age of 50. The only thing that rules you out for me is if you've been a year plus 1 day since your last period, because then you're menopausal. Other than that, we'll have a conversation with everyone to be able to give you a good picture of the landscape so you can see where you need to be. So first, that's your conventional. Now, when we look at how we're going to take care of holism, your whole body to optimize your hormones. So that's that 49% of people where
Mhm.
they it's unexplained. Those are the areas where we come in beautifully and where we can really optimize your fertility for men and women. So it is the 5 factors, which are nutrition, sleep, movement or exercise, relationships, and stress. So in practice for me, and starting 15 years ago or a little longer ago, when it came to helping people in these areas, I was helping them with nutrition, and if people can follow a diet, wonderful. But what would happen is, or, and this is how I would like you to move your body. These are the
Mhm.
aspects that are going to help you. They would come in and they say, I'm doing everything. Why can't I conceive? But their stress was through the roof. So when
Oh,
we're looking at people who are, and this is really what I'm seeing a lot of professional women, the women that have been waiting until they're 35 or older to be able to conceive, and then they're willing to do whatever it takes. But the biggest issue is that stress component
that
because
stress factor
they can follow it.
affects
That's
so
it.
many areas of our body.
So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to discuss that with you specifically
Sure,
because
yeah.
that is our number one. So what do you learn? You go online, you try to figure out what you should be doing for stress. Somebody says that you should meditate, but your mind can't stop racing in order to slow you down enough to meditate. Someone says to breathe a certain way. And how do you know at all that any of this is even working? So you don't
Good
actually
question.
know. You don't have a metric to measure it by. You have a partner who's, you know, clinically thinking, where are the metrics and how do I make sure that I know, how this is outcome is coming along. And so what we do is we address that first. Stress and autonomic nervous system is where we start first, and it's where I would really recommend looking. And so it's really 2 factors though. It's our cognitive conscious mind of knowing that we have stress.
Mm.
And then how do we take care of those mechanisms that are self-protection for ourselves, that are our subconscious stress protective mechanisms. And so you need to really find a balance with both and address all of those other factors, such as nutrition and sleep, and relationship status and movement, physical movement. So
So
all of
that,
it comes together in that way.
yeah, that really brings a total holistic picture for them. I know it's hard for people to just transform overnight, so it is something that must take time. If they just start incorporating a little bit of each one of these
Yeah.
steps over
So we
time.
do, yes, we do. It usually takes 3 to 6 months in a program like mine. I don't want to focus on my program. I want to give you the information you need for your people. But 3 to 6 months usually, and 6 months is my favorite sweet spot in there. And I usually recommend while you're doing one of these lifestyle changes and functional wellness approaches to actually not try to conceive during the first beginning time. You have sex for fun, you get to know each other, you spend more time in that relationship space, which is a challenge at times, especially when you're in this space of trying to conceive. When
Mhm.
I was trying to get pregnant, my there's a performance issue for men. It doesn't mean that they can't, but it's a different kind of pressure. We lose this fun space and we're so stressed and we feel so alone that there isn't the joy and the lightness of intimacy. And so really trying to find that space where you can connect together as partnership, and in that relationship find that intimacy and that care and support for each other. That really is incredible. It's incredible to be able to have that. So I would recommend, if you have the time and the mindset for it, to remove the obstacle of trying while you're starting this method, while you're starting this whole process.
Yes, and I was infertile. I've never had children, and I'm at the age where when I was younger, there were no options. There were no coaches like you. It was just your lot in life that you had to live with. And even being a nurse, I had many opportunities to adopt children that were handicapped and so forth, but I had a husband that absolutely refused not to. So, there's just so many choices, though, that you can make today, and having a competent coach that you can really go to and work all of these issues out if adoption is not your thing that you want to do. And I know we have the whole adoption issue is, and I have a whole story on that because our best friends adopted a little girl and we were her godparents. And when she was 6 years old, her biological mother, who was a teenager at the time, was able to go to court and take her back and forever changed their lives, changed our lives too, because we were open to adoption at that point. But that door was closed when she went back to her biological mother. But had there been services like yours, I'm sure we would have been in your clinic.
Yeah, and
So,
and I wish I had someone too, because, and my children know that I speak openly about them. And both of my children had struggles when they were younger with their own behavioral things. And they've been through a lot of coaching and a lot of work. One of the other reasons why I wanted to open this space for fertility is in hopes that someday we'll demonstrate that we have healthier babies when we have healthier moms and dads that are actually growing those babies. So I'm curious to see how that research goes down the road, but they're aware. And on the adoption note, I have a beautiful niece who's adopted. My brother and sister-in-law also struggled with fertility issues. But I know that fear. We had that fear you have that fear when they're first, in our case, when she was first born, and that is not a fear that you want to have. But I do really encourage people to welcome whatever form of parenting is their form of parenting that's acceptable to them, either way, in any way. But to really the healthful changes that you can make in a program like this are just astronomical, even if you make that decision of, I want to adopt and go this direction.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Your information will impact a lot of women who might want to still have children, but they're struggling. So I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's my pleasure.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.